Hello, everyone. Welcome to Plan On It with attorney Christopher Botti, board certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. Chris has more than 30 years of experience helping individuals and families plan for long term care and protect what they built. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Chris and I are talking about the cost of a comprehensive estate plan. Chris is going to explain what families are actually paying for, why prices vary, and how careful planning can prevent far greater expenses down the road. Chris, good to see you.
Great to see you, Sean. Looking forward to this podcast.
Let's right out of the gate. Okay, families are, starting to think about estate planning. Cost is often one of the biggest concerns was, as I mentioned in the intro. How do you explain what goes into the pricing of a truly comprehensive plan?
As you probably can figure out, you can go online and find a plan for free, right? And kind of you get what you're paying for, right? So when you get a law firm involved, like for example, let me use myself as an example. I'm what they call a certified specialist in trust and probate law, and so to get that designation, you have to do a lot of extra work. You don't just become one of these. You have to take another bar exam and pass it. You've got to prove a minimum number of experience, 5 years minimum of experience in your field. But the most difficult part of the process of becoming certified is you got to go through peer review. So you need to get other colleagues, attorneys, and judges to vouch for your knowledge and your credibility and your skills. And so, like a full service law firm like mine, who devotes their entire practice to one area, estate planning, there's a certain amount of overhead associated with running a business, right? You've got employees, you've got malpractice insurance, you've got, be available having people answering the phones as opposed to going to a computer a voice tree or something like that. And so, like with a full service law firm, you get full service treatment, and it's the opposite of doing it yourself. And so when I tell clients, look, you're making an investment here. This is everything you've worked your entire life to accumulate, right? You want to make sure it's done correctly, because if it's not done correctly, you will never find out. And the reason why is you're either dead or you're incapacitated. So do you want to take a chance? Do you want to self-medicate, like go online and read about, well, I need this medication for the symptoms? It's too dangerous in my opinion, right? And what I've delivered is like, look, you're going to pay a premium to have a lawyer do it. It's going to cost more than an online service, obviously. But what you got is backing from a law firm who's going to be there for not only you, but your family when the time comes to implement the paperwork. And so it's a completely apples and orange experience between like going the cheap route, which is going online, looking for, an online company to do it, or buying a book and trying to do it yourself, versus engaging a law firm from start to finish where they're holding your hand. They're not standing in front of you, they're sitting beside you, guiding you through the process from start to finish. And most of my clients, when they see the value in that, it's not just price, it's value, right? What value do you give? And I know it's a very lengthy winded answer, and I apologize for that, but I'm very passionate about this. Like, it's a completely different experience when you get a lawyer involved.
Well, I mean, first of all, yeah, by all means, educate yourself, right? If you're thinking about it, read a book, what have you. There's so many resources online. But one thing that I have uh, talked with other attorneys about in almost any field, because every topic you can find information and templates online. It seems like you're dealing with international trade tariffs. There's online templates for it.
You
But
got
what you're
AI,
not
for
getting,
example, right? You got AI now,
right?
potentially
But what you're
disrupting
what you're
this.
not getting is someone like yourself who knows what questions to ask you that are going to then, the strategy that'll end up resulting in understanding my situation completely, which I'm not going to get from a do-it-yourself situation.
Yeah, and like one of the most important, there's two really critical skills as an estate planner. One is you have to have life experience, right? When I became an attorney, I was 24 years old when I passed the bar exam. I was sworn in, and no one would hire a 24-year-old to do estate planning because you have no life experience. You need to like know what it's like to have children and deal with all the issues that children present, to lose a loved one or a parent, all these issues, dealing with incapacity. And so having life experience along with the ability to listen, which is another critical issue. Listen to your clients. What do they really, what do they really want, right? And so you can't do that with a computer. Okay, it's not possible. Even with AI, as it improves, you're not going to get to the point where you've got someone who's been in the trenches, has been through this thousands of times, literally myself, and you want that interaction, because you need it. It's your
Yeah.
life.
No, I get it. Makes total sense. Let's talk, I mean, related to that sort of, the specifics, right? Estate planning, uh, documents and what have you probably look different from firm to firm. What distinguishes, say, a basic set of documents from a more comprehensive plan that, actually addresses California probate, taxes, long-term decision making, like all the things you talked about that come into play?
So we have basically two types of plans, and they're both foundational documents. Like when you get into high net worth situations, I'll define high net worth as married people who have more than $30 million worth of assets, or a single who has more than $15 million of assets. You're going to need more than these foundational documents in order to protect your estate. But let's just start with the foundations. You got to get the foundation built first before you can move on with and build the first story, right? And so if you don't have a probate estate, right, then you can get away with the basic estate plan, which would consist of a will to deal with death. I die, here's where my stuff goes, which is what most people understand a will to do. That's exactly what it does. And then you'll have two incapacity documents. In case I get sick, I'll put someone in charge of the money. That's your durable power of attorney for financial purposes. And then I can no longer communicate my wishes to the doctor. I will have an advance directive in California, which is a medical power of attorney. So that's the non-probate estate. Okay, if you have a probate estate, then you're going to layer on top of those three the living trust as a centerpiece. The living trust will replace the will as the document you look to figure out where things go when you pass on. And the reason why you're deploying a living trust is because you have an estate that would go through probate. And so with a living trust plan, there are more documents involved because you've got more assets to deal with.
Let's ground this in reality, right? So, and I know obviously you can't name names, but can you share a story about a situation where investing in a well-designed plan saved your client significant expense or stress or legal complications or all of the above later?
When it's designed correctly, it works perfectly. And so the biggest compliment I can get is when a client reaches out, I mean, a successor trustee who has now become a client because their parent, for example, let's use a child, for example. Parents decide to set up a trust that says, I'm going to leave my assets to this child, right? And the child calls after the parents have passed on, and they reach out to us and for assistance and guidance, and when they complete the process, which happens very quickly, they're like, I'm so glad my parents did this, right? Because it all went so smoothly. And when it goes smoothly, people want to hug you. Essentially, it's just amazing for them just to get through this process, no hassle. It's when the plans are not designed correctly where you have problems, right? And so done correctly, it's just a smooth transition. So that's the goal, is to make this as easy as possible for the people you leave behind, right?
California is, I don't know, I guess it has a reputation for, for their probate being, slow and expensive. How do the costs of probate compare with the cost of creating a plan that avoids it?
Well, okay, so it's significantly more expensive to go through a probate process. So like $1 million estate, your probate fees, court costs, all that would exceed $15,000. Okay, just to get that estate probated. It could be more than that, by the way. There's lots of ways probate attorneys can uh, add to those fees through the process. And so when you look at that and compare that to the cost of doing a living trust correctly, it is significantly more to do it through a probate process. And so trusts are more efficient, more cost effective, and faster.
Got it. And so, if you have an effective, well-designed trust estate plan, does that basically do away with probate costs?
That's the ultimate goal. Correct. You want to avoid the court system completely. You're basically, look, probate exists for people who fail to plan, right? The whole reason why we have a probate procedure in California, and every state, by the way, has one of these, is we have to have a mechanism in place for people who die without a will or they die with a will. And so this is why probate exists. And so if you say, hey, look, I'm aware of the system, I can opt out of it. All I got to do is a living trust, and I'll avoid this process entirely. The aggravation factor and the peace of mind that comes with that and the cost savings is off the charts. And so it's a clear winner to do it, to opt out of the system and do these documents to avoid the process entirely.
And, you said, comparing probate, the cost, potential costs in going through probate versus the cost of, investing up front in a plan is going to be significantly less. But I'm guessing that uh, trusts, do people assume that, one trust costs the same as another trust? There's got to be factors that influence, right? I mean, everybody's situation is different, right? So is it a sliding scale depending on how big my estate is? Complexity?
Yeah, there are a lot of lawyers, colleagues of mine that basically charge based upon the size of the estate. The more assets, the more expensive the plan is. But that's not our philosophy, okay? Because whether you're Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, or someone who just owns a home and has a retirement account, those foundational documents that you need to build are essentially the same. The high net worth individuals need more than the foundational documents. So our philosophy is, look, it doesn't matter as long as if you have a probate estate, we're going to charge you the same fee whether you have, you know, just barely above the line where you would go through probate versus someone who has significantly higher assets. Those foundational documents are essentially the same. But most of my colleagues will charge based upon the size of the estate, where I look at it like, well, no, what's it going to take to get this process done for you? And we're not looking at the size necessarily. We're just looking at the issue with, do you have an estate would go through probate? If so, you should do a trust. And we price our services accordingly based upon that. And then if you need more, because you have high net worth, of course, there's other documents we would have to prepare. It's beyond the scope of this particular podcast. But like the idea is, look, let's get that foundation built. First, you charge a fair price for that.
You mentioned I mean, I get it. It makes sense, right? Whether I got 10 million or 1 million, it's, the
It's the same
paperwork
amount of
covers.
work. It's
Yeah.
the same amount
Sound
of
on
work
work.
with the same set of
Yeah.
documents. They're identical. So
Yeah.
why would you? Well, I know why you would do that, because you can get it, right? But like, I've built a reputation on, pricing my stuff fairly, and so it's really important to me that I provide value.
Beyond the drafting of the documents, uh, like you said, if I'm a high net worth individual, there may be additional, services I need. So what ongoing, services or guidance do families typically, need as part of a comprehensive plan? Especially when it comes to funding the trust and updating things over time.
Well, one of the reasons why I got into this practice area is because it gives you an opportunity to build long-term relationships with people, right? And so when we are initially retained to do a living trust, we start the process, and the process starts with, the first meeting in the office where the client comes in with a workbook that we ask them to complete. We have a conversation with them for about an hour or so, and we come up with a plan, right? And so that's the very beginning of the process. The attorney's involved. And then from there, it goes into the drafting phase. And then from the drafting phase, the client reviews it, gets any questions they may have, any changes they might want to make to their documents. And ultimately, they end up coming back and signing their paperwork. But that's not the end of the relationship as far as we're concerned. We want to stay in touch with our clients. One of the reasons why I'm doing these podcasts is to maintain that ongoing communication by providing content to our clients via the podcast series that we're doing, the blog articles, the newsletters that we do, and the ebook that I wrote about long-term care planning. This is all about my continuing commitment going forward to be with our clients, to provide information for them so they maintain the relationships with us. And so you're getting that with a firm like mine. Okay. You're getting that kind of long-term relationship. And it's not just processing paperwork. Okay, you're done, and move on with your life. We're on to our next client. That's not how we approach it.
Well, it ties into to this idea where, some families, they worry, right, about being oversold or paying for things they don't need. And, there's a disparity in knowledge, obviously, dealing with an attorney versus not understanding the law. How do you help them understand the difference between, necessary planning and unnecessary complexity?
There's lots of drivers to complexity, right? And so in the current environment, we have way more flexibility in designing an estate plan than we did, say, 20 years ago, when the estate tax system was significantly lower. And then when I refer to the estate tax, I'm referring to the federal limits in terms of how many assets you can have before your estate would face taxation. And so that number today is $15 million. It wasn't that long ago you were looking at, a $600,000 exemption. So when you get into taxable estates, then your trusts become more elaborate, more complicated. So, I try to make this as easy as possible when explaining what I'm giving you. I'm giving you a set of documents that deal with two issues and two issues only: who's in charge of what and when, and who gets what and when. Now, it takes a stack of paper about that thick to make all that happen, because we have all these laws we have to deal with, right? And so, by the end of the day, if you understand that who's in charge of what and when, and who gets what and when. From a client perspective, you are 99% of the way there. It's up to the lawyer to explain the legalese if you have questions, but basically the documents, what you're accomplishing is really straightforward and simple. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Right, right, no. So, on the other side of that, the sort of the other side of the coin, I guess, someone chooses the cheaper option for whatever reason. And so what what risks arise, right? Like what happens when they've gone with an online form or some bare bones package? How does that I mean, they're dead and gone. How does that affect their family later?
Well, there's a multitude of risks. So there could be problems with the execution of the paperwork, or it wasn't signed and notarized correctly, right? There could be internal inconsistencies with the way the language reads, where there's an ambiguity and when you deal with ambiguity or fatal defects in language, the only way for that to be overcome is through a court. You go to the probate court involved, because the probate court deals with trust problems also. And so you end up having to go to court to get something fixed because it wasn't done correctly. So you can have problems with execution. You can have problems with the actual drafting of the paperwork. You can have problems with the funding of the trust, where you do a living trust thinking, okay, I've done my trust, but you don't follow through with, wait, we have to put the real estate in the trust, and you don't end up doing that. And so you end up dying with a living trust and a house that's not in the trust. And your estate's now going through probate because you didn't fund it correctly. So you can make mistakes along the way that are fatal, that will end up costing your family a lot of money, way more than it would be if you did it correctly using a lawyer. And so, yeah, you're playing with fire essentially. And so there's lots of things that can go south when you're doing it yourself.
Wrapping it up, we've got someone, listening right now. They're evaluating the cost of uh, estate planning. What's the most important thing you would want them to understand about value, longevity, and the long-term financial impact of getting this right? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but what's your closing argument?
I'm not a litigator, but I'll do my best to do a closing argument here. Okay, so first of all, it's about relationships, right? So you're choosing a lawyer. You want to make sure that lawyer's experienced, right? And so that they have the skills necessary to do the job, that they're specialists. They're not just jacks of all, masters of none, because there are tons of lawyers out there, and they'll take anything that walks in the door. And so one day they're doing personal injury cases, the next day they're doing bankruptcy cases, the next day they're doing family law cases, and so that's a generalist, all right? So yes, can they get the job done? Maybe, all right, but that's not their sole focus. And so this is everything you've worked your entire life to accumulate. So you probably want someone who knows what they're doing, like getting a specialist whose sole purpose function, is so firm, is devoted to one practice area, one practice area only. You want to look for someone who's not only going to be involved in the planning of the documents and the signing of the paperwork, but also the follow through, the funding process, and ultimately questions that come up down the road, because life goes on. You forget about every interaction you have with a lawyer, and you have a question like, I just bought another property in another state. What do I do? Like, we want our clients to reach out to us. And so what we give to our clients is a long-term relationship. And my commitment to that is reflected not only in the fact that, when they meet with me, I explain this is how it's going to work. We're going to be holding your hand through this entire process. But again, with this, with this online stuff that we're doing now, it's my effort to keep my clients informed. When the law changes, just subscribe to our newsletter. You're going to hear about it. And so if you have a question, just shoot us an email. We'll get on the phone with a lawyer. And so we value those long-term relationships. That is so important. It's about relationships at the end of the day. And so I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't care about my clients and didn't want to have those kind of interactions and develop those relationships.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's compelling, very compelling for sure. Well, we're out of time because that's the way it goes. But it was good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, that was great to see you. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of Plan on It with attorney Christopher Botti. If you want to access more resources, including the ebook that Chris mentioned, the 2026 Medi-Cal ebook, and upcoming estate planning workshops, visit boddylaw.com. Thanks for listening. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, share a link with someone that would benefit. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sean.